Hi, my name is Danny and welcome to Pagan Perspective, Thursday on Subsweek. This week's question asked us about Celtic resources and pagan resources in general. So we've heard a lot of really great book suggestions this week and a few other resources, and I just wanted to add some of my favorite pagan resources and then a few books that haven't been touched on yet. I do want to briefly mention that Celtic can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Celtic can point to a specific historical time period, to different geographical locations, and it can mean a lot of different cultural things. So when you ask about Celtic resources, that's kind of a vague umbrella term to use. If you're curious to hear more about kind of what Celtic can mean, I really think you should watch Yucca's video from last week. It covers it perfectly. The first resource I use is, of course, nature. My path is very nature-based, so I recommend just going outside, walking the same place throughout the season so you really get to feel what the earth does and how you are connected to it. I also love to listen to podcasts during work when I'm traveling, and there are some really excellent pagan podcasts out there. So the first one is, of course, Druidcast, and that is done monthly around the 20th or so. It's put on by Dave the Bard through OBOD. It covers music that's pagan-based, talky bits that can range from philosophical topics to magic how-tos. It's a really great resource. The second one is the Celtic Myth Show. If you are looking to learn more about Celtic myth and folktale, that is the show to listen to. They use different voices and music. It's beautifully produced. The podcast is Down at the Crossroads. That show has a mix of music and interviews with authors and pagan writers. It's very current and really opens your view to a lot of different pagan paths and what the community is doing on a whole. There are also tons of other podcasts that aren't producing regularly or as frequently, such as like Modern Witch, another pagan podcast. Those are well worth listening to the backlog of inventory that they have for their shows. I also love to read blogs since I write a blog myself. And the first one I want to mention is The Wild Hunt. If you are a pagan and you are not reading The Wild Hunt, then you should get on that. It covers news topics, updates from the community, information about leaders, and cultural topics that are relevant today. It is an amazing, amazing resource for the community. And they do a Kickstarter fund every year to raise money for the blog and the writing. It is excellent writing. You also have John Beckett at pathos.com. John Beckett is a druid and talks about Celtic issues and druidry. Pathos in general is a collection of blogs where you'll find many different spiritual paths and especially a wide range of pagan paths and pagan writers. Next, I want to touch on groups. There can be a lot said for working with other people in your local area, and groups like OBOD is a great way to do that. So OBOD is the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and they are worldwide but located out of the UK. There are groves all across the world, and as a member you get a list of those groves. Other Druidry groups include ADF or AODA, the American Druids of America. Both have local groups and a larger organization. Check out their websites if you're looking to get involved in Druidry. I also wanted to mention Circle Sanctuary. I think Tatiana mentioned it yesterday, but Circle Sanctuary is about an hour from where I live, out of Madison, and Selena Fox does a lot of advocacy work, the Nature Reserve, where they do ritual and events for pagans there. It's an amazing resource. They also have a podcast. And personally, I interacted with them when my sister, who was Wiccan, was in the process of dying. She was at hospice, and Circle Sanctuary helped align her with a really great spiritual mentor for that process of dying and passing on. Circle Sanctuary was a very wonderful resource for our family during that time. So they reach out to pagans of all types and stripes and are really powerful advocates for the community. I would also mention that there are plenty of Pagan Pride events, festivals, events, concerts, study groups all across the country. It does take a little digging sometimes to find those groups, but if you really want to work with people, then go for it. Find those resources in your local community and take the initiative to start your own. I think sometimes we get a little timid and scared about putting ourselves out there and being the first to recommend a group or an activity. We think we have to be experts, but really just reach out to others of similar ilk in your community. Pagan community is also rich with musicians and storytellers, and I just want to briefly mention 3 of my favorites because I think we can learn a lot from music and really connect to our paths in a new way. S.J. Tucker, of course, does some amazing folk, bluegrass, rock stuff, beautiful stories, and really powerful pagan music. There's Dave the Bard, who does a more kind of traditional folk sound and a bit more rocky. It's great music, very druid orientated, tells a lot of story in it, beautiful music. And there's also Omnia, who I've heard on some of the other videos comments talking about how they're not a Celtic group. And you're right, they're just a pagan group. But they have beautiful harp music and flute. There are a lot of Celtic elements to their music and a worldwide field. Plus they're just really awesome rock out music to work to. Finally, on to books. There are a few kind of points I want to talk about when looking for books to use, and rather than focusing on specific titles and authors, I want to kind of pass on what I do when evaluating resources when it comes to books. So the first thing is, don't be afraid to start with basics books. I think sometimes you reach a level where you're like, I've read everything, I know all the basics, it's not worth my time. But it can be really important to find different points of views when you're discerning your path and trying to grow and become more. So beginner books also often feature other links and resources that can kind of take you on a merry trip of new information you might not have seen before. Of course, fairy tales, myths, folklores are really important when working with the Celtic path. Yucca mentioned the mabinogion. There's also the Ulster and Fenian Cycle of Irish myths. There are many different mythologies that can kind of be considered Celtic. So you'll want to pick one and start researching. If it doesn't work, there's probably another one that you'll find even more enjoyable. Luckily, Amazon's Kindle store has a lot of those in their free ebooks, and you can read those on a PC app or an Android or iPhone app. I'd also say don't forget to research real history. That can be a little harder to discern what is accurate history when it comes to Celtic research. There's been a lot of romanticizing around the Celts, and sometimes that presents a problem when evaluating academic works on whether it's really a true interpretation or whether it's more a romanticized version of it. So be cautious with history, but research it wide and far. I do have a few favorite authors that I want to share. I mentioned Philip Carr-Gomm previously, especially on my personal channel. He's from OMGEE. Wonderful works, especially in the beginning Druidry books, and his blog is great too. I also really like Starhawk. She has some strong Celtic reconstruction elements to their work. It's obviously not all Celtic or just Celtic, but there are elements that are very strong. One of my all-time favorite authors is John O'Donoghue. I read Anam Cara first, and it just blew my mind. Amazing piece of work. He writes from a Christian point of view, but he is the, I think, epitome of Celtic spirituality. Celtic spirituality has not impacted just pagans, but Christians and atheists and artists all across the world. John O'Donohue really captures that elemental aspect of Celtic spirituality and connecting to the divine through the symbols and sounds and feelings that really resonate with Celtic world. If you're looking for more books, I also do book reviews on my personal channel, so you can subscribe there and kind of get those updates. YouTube is a vibrant and growing community when it comes to pagans, so make sure to take a gander at other people's channels. You are apt to find a few more Celtic pagans on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and may you find peace in the sacred grove.